Ship anchored near the United Arab Emirates was seized by unidentified personnel and is being taken toward Iranian waters, while an Indian flag cargo vessel was attacked, caught fire, and sank near Oman. All 14 crew members aboard the cargo ship were rescued safely. Authorities have not confirmed who was responsible for either incident. The events come amid heightened regional tensions, with Iran previously targeting vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. Although a ceasefire between the United States and Iran remains in place, both sides have warned it could collapse. Recent incidents underscore ongoing instability affecting shipping and energy routes in the region. Talks between President Trump and Xi Jinping in Beijing highlighted tensions over Taiwan, with Xi warning that mishandling the issue could lead to conflict between the two countries. While China emphasized Taiwan as a central concern, U.S. officials said discussions focused more on the Iran conflict and economic cooperation. The United States reaffirmed its long-standing policy, including continued arms sales to Taiwan, which Beijing opposes. Taiwan remains a major flashpoint due to its strategic importance and political status, with China asserting territorial claims and the U.S. maintaining support for the island's defense capabilities. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the United States and China will begin formal discussions on artificial intelligence safety following meetings between President Trump and Xi Jinping in Beijing. The talks aim to establish global standards and safeguards to prevent advanced AI from being misused, particularly by non-state actors. Both nations also discussed trade, investment, semiconductor policy, and maintaining open energy routes through the Strait of Hormuz. The discussions come amid broader geopolitical tensions and technological competition, with the United States emphasizing its leadership position in AI development. A Kyiv court has ordered the detention of Andrei Yermak, former chief of staff to Volodymyr Zelensky, on corruption charges linked to a $10.5 million real estate project. Bail was set at 140 million hryvnias, which Yermak said he cannot afford, while denying the allegations and pledging to appeal. The investigation involves alleged money laundering through a luxury development near Kyiv and is part of broader anti-corruption efforts. Authorities say the probe is ongoing and Zelensky has not been implicated. The case highlights persistent corruption concerns in Ukraine, which remains a major obstacle to its efforts to join the European Union. UK Health Secretary Wes Streeting has resigned, citing a loss of confidence in Prime Minister Keir Starmer and calling for a leadership contest within the Labour Party. In his resignation letter, Streeting criticized Starmer's leadership style and said it was clear he would not lead the party into the next general election. The move comes amid mounting political pressure following Labour's poor election results and internal divisions, with dozens of MPs urging Starmer to step down. While a formal leadership challenge has not yet been triggered, party rules require sufficient MP backing for a contest to proceed. The U.S. Senate unanimously approved a resolution to suspend senators' pay during government shutdowns, aiming to increase accountability as funding lapses become more frequent. Introduced by John Kennedy, the measure would withhold salaries until government funding is restored, though it will take effect only after the next election due to constitutional requirements.
If I were also king for a day and I wanted to stop government shutdowns, I'd do more than this. I would do two things. I would say that if government shuts down, a senator loses his pay. It's not escrowed, and you get it back later. You just don't get your pay. I would also say that you can't leave Washington. You can't go home. If you make people forfeit their pay and tell them they can't leave Washington, we won't have any more shutdowns. And everybody in this body knows that.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today. Now the protagonists.
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Only the paranoid survive.
And maybe person of interest is right. Harold Finch. Only the paranoid survive. I wonder. We've spoken at length on this channel about the rise of censorship, demise of free speech, unrestricted surveillance of law-abiding citizens, the collection of data about every aspect of our lives, rendering anonymity and privacy luxuries of the past. Government control of individuals and the internet, it's not coming, it's upon us right now. Is the general populace still hoping those who speak out can halt some of the worst aspects of the digital gulag being built? Or do they believe they have nothing to hide and nothing to fear? We're about to find out as the bricks of the gulag are almost in place. In the EU, in the UK, in Commonwealth countries, and in the East. How do we fight back? Do we ditch the smartphone? Find the dirty one? 2 phones, I have trouble with 1. Abandon social media with the knowledge that the tech oligarchs who run them are inextricable arms of government. In fact, they are government. They are government. Government works for them. How do we abandon the internet now that the government controls it entirely? Our panel today is Robin Tilbrook, Chairman of the English Democrats, Joachim Hagopian, great journo, great investigative journalist. He's one of our panelists. And Tony Nicklick, if he could just move to his left a bit, because we only have half of Tony, and we need us, there he is. I was wondering how I was going to do that, and I thought I'll just ease this one in, and look how smooth that was. Robin, great to see you again. Where do you think we are? Because you're a very level-headed solicitor. You're one guy that could defend me. In fact, so could Tony, but he's an Australian, you're in the UK, so if I get arrested in the UK, you can look after me. But where are we now? Do you think we're at a point of no return?
Well, one of the things that's been quite interesting over the last couple of weeks is the government's response in preparation for Tommy Robinson's Unite the Kingdom demo tomorrow. So some months ago, there was a demo, Unite the Kingdom, and probably 1 million or so people turned up to it. It was almost entirely peaceful and good-natured. They paraded through the centre of London and flew lots of Cross of St George and Union Jacks and other flags. And the government, of course, absolutely hates it, because it's any demonstration of patriotism here in UK is frowned upon by officialdom and by the Labour politicians, and indeed to some extent by the Conservatives as well. So in preparation for this demonstration, the government has been banning people from coming to the country, including a member of the European Parliament who sat in on the same side as the Conservative Party when we were still in the EU, a Dutch lawyer, and various other commentators, none of whom have actually committed any relevant offences at all, and they're basically being banned, and there's 8 of them so far, simply because the government doesn't like what they are likely to say. And the police are already showing that they're closing down all the pubs in that area of London. They've demonstrated they intend to enforce the law to the maximum of what they can do, and they're also intending to have armoured vehicles there. Apparently, they're going to use surveillance and digital facial recognition systems, etc., etc. So what we've got here is an instance where the state is really going very heavy-handed against an expression of dissent to the way in which the country has been governed, and I think that is symptomatic, really, of where we are.
Well, Kim, have we reached the point of no return? I mean, I often say, again, I'm always full of doom and gloom, but that light at the end of the tunnel is a bloody great big train coming towards us, and I see the world at the moment sort of standing on the edge. Imagine this abyss, and you're looking down into the black hole, sort of flames and destruction below. And if you stand on the edge of a big circle, this big hole, eventually the sides give way. Are we wise enough to move back, or is it too late? We're going to fall over the edge.
Well, I'm never one to give up. Oh, they're too powerful for us. I can't go there. Even if they have the odds on their side, which they probably do. But, none of us can give up and just, feel defeated to the point where we just submit. We cannot do that if we want the good to prevail over the evil. So, it's a matter of, spreading the word, getting people activated to, go out and demonstrate in the streets, to, have some kind of influence over their representation in the government, mobilize into anti-fascist government over control of the people. I think the people of the world are getting...
At the moment, we have Kim. He's just frozen. He's disappeared, and he's come back again. Amazing, just like that. Technology for you. Tony Nickling, digital ID will become part of everyday life, controlled by governments, digital money, digital. One could probably feel that the government is giving us the digital. What would you say?
Oh, indeed. The issues with respect to what we're seeing, I know I've sort of mentioned it here in previous posts, the panopticon. It's one that Jeremy Bentham, an English scholar, and it was extended upon by Michel Foucault. The issues with respect to that are this overarching surveillance society that seeks in its core to self-police. And how do they get self-policing? Well, they implement these policies where people believe they are being watched even when they're not. However, the crux of the issue is this: that was written quite 100 and something, almost 200 years ago, where Michel Foucault all the way through the 60s. But I think the more important thing is this, is that they were talking about this society that was more visual and more physically orientated. What we're actually seeing now is one where the digital age and surveillance and those sorts of implementations. Let me give you an example. You go to work and now you've got these keystroke loggers. So your employer, as you're hitting a key on the keyboard, is starting to log what's happening, what are your movements, where are you going, who are you meeting? And then obviously then we've got the GPS on your phone and notifications. So it is quite alarming, and the essence of it for the government, in my view, would be a level of control. But where does that end and where does it start? And I think we've forgotten the very essence of why this was here and why it was implemented. The essence is really to control society, but also understand a little bit more. But what it also does from a philosophical angle, it starts to get each person distrusting each other, distrusting government, distrusting so many others. And so it may be perceived from an institutional level as something maybe beneficial. However, I think it's eroding the moral and social fabric of many Western democracies on which we're built on freedom and having that liberty to understand how and what to do, when to do it.
Robin, I'm just 2030. It seems like, mark that in your calendar. 2030. It seems that governments are sort of chuffing along at great pace and haste to 2030, and I mean, so they're making sure everything's in place when 2030 rolls around. Do you think governments are looking at that particular date? Because I mean, your government under Starmer and our government under Albanese, and look at the EU if you must. You've got von der Leyen there, Queen Ursula. She's there, and then you've got Merz in Germany. Germany wants to be best fighting force in Europe by 2039, but way earlier from all accounts. Have all these things happening? Because everything is coming together, censorship, digital ID, and it's all rolling at about the same time. Sometimes one lags, but they catch up, heading towards this pointy end of the plane. 2030, is it just people's imagination, or is it reality?
Well, it's certainly not entirely imagination, because 2030 does appear in official documents and legislation, and one of the examples of that was Theresa May, a notionally Conservative Prime Minister. She signed up to various targets, including net zero targets for 2030. And so far as the issue of digital identity is concerned, and state control and access to digital identity, I was thinking when Tony was talking that actually here the government announced that they wanted to do digital ID for everybody. Well, that is everybody who's settled here, rather than all of our problems with illegal immigration. They didn't want to do digital identity for them. But there was a huge protest, and more than 3 million people have signed up for a petition to go against that. And the government initially backed down. However, it appeared in the King's speech as part of their legislative programme for the next parliamentary session. So we've got government not listening, carrying on with what they want to do, and what they want to do does sound pretty alarming, and it sounds as if it might be irreversible, but it certainly sounds as if they're not going to listen to any protest, and in this country, we're probably not going to have a general election before 2029, so just a bit short of the 2030 date.
And even though you may have a change of government, it's just a different face on fairly similar policies, and who knows? And then you got a celebrity game show host in waiting, Nigel. But anything could happen. I mean, to go from one disaster to another. Well, Kim, 2030, what does it mean?
Well, I mean, they're racing towards it. They're trying to implement all these draconian kind of laws and dictates far in advance of 2030. That's why we're seeing so much activity going on right now. It's interesting that right now we have not only the king coming out and saying, yep, this is going to be the parliamentary agenda to take over the digital ID, for complete control. He says it's voluntary, but at the same time, for all the Brightons to be employed, they're going to be required to do it because their employers are going to require it. It's going to be compulsive. And this is the agenda, of course, on every nation. And interestingly enough, at the same time that the king's pontificating on that very same point, we have Trump over there with Xi in China, which is the social credit score model system of top-down control over the people. And he brings over his technocratic fascists with him, Elon Musk and Larry Fink. Oh my God, it's the globalist invasion, And interestingly enough, I know this is a little bit off topic, but this goes to show you, this guy's a bully everywhere he goes, and he's got only sycophants in his administration, yet he plays the role of the sycophant in the face of Xi Jinping, who holds all the cards of power now as the ascending global superpower to overtake the United States. So it's interesting that he bow downs and he's just complimenting galore, where he can throw his weight around and treat other people terribly, be the bully with the Europe and Canada and anybody else. But when it comes to the real power, which is now Xi Jinping in China, oh yes, he's bowing down, I mean, it's just, and he has all his technocrats that are bringing this, total surveillance state mania, madness to the whole world, So, yeah, it's a bad sign, but if the people mobilize globally together, we can overcome it. I believe that. We must. We have to fight and resist actively.
I don't know. By the way, I think we need to fight and we need all that sort of stuff. I think that train is a very big train and we're all tied to the track. So I'm not looking forward to the next kilometre as it comes towards us. Tony, CBDCs, if not, when? Tell us about your thoughts on those. I think it's all part of this digital age. It's where the government gives us the digit.
Well, as we're saying here, we need to unpack where it comes from. So what we're actually seeing is this tension of between global governance and free society. You can take that back to Benjamin Franklin, where he spoke about too much security and freedom. So at what point and where is that balance? Unfortunately, when we look at the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, well, it harks almost spot on to what Benjamin Franklin was talking about, because what he was actually considering back then was how much of my want for safety will be traded for liberty. He was right on point, and bless that guy. Gosh, he had incredible foresight. In 2030, here it is, the Sustainable Development Goals talk about health, currency, climate, education, digital inclusion into all sorts of things, but is that making us any safer? Well, does intrusiveness into one's liberty and preventing one's liberty by way of controlling their flow. And what's a better way of controlling their flow? Let's see where they're spending their money. You cannot engage in the market. And I know Robin was talking about it a moment ago, and Jen as well. I think what we need to do is understand that it's a wider package, and I've written about this in various journalistic pieces in The Spectator and things like that. But the issue here is that overarching surveillance society where one perceives their safety as being something that is being done here. Now, we spoke a moment ago about being in China. Well, China is one of the most heavily surveilled societies in the world, where you've got the social credit system. Nearly everything is being done by virtue of electronic means. So you're paying things electronically, you're engaging, everything you do, your social media, and we're seeing that increasingly. Now, take that back, say 15, 20 years, and you would have had heavy criticism from democratic societies such as Australia, especially the USA and UK, Canada, New Zealand, and the European Union, stating, oh my gosh, how can the Chinese do this to people? Well, they've effectively set the model upon which a lot of these democratic nations are now going towards. So when you look at how someone spends their central bank digital currencies, is essentially a tack on to the other various mechanisms that we're seeing through society. Is it alarming? Well, yes, it is. No longer can I buy something privately because everything becomes public, and the greater concern beyond that is, whilst it's perceived as being safe, all you need, just like your biometrics, if they're hacked, how do you redeem that? And is it up to a citizen now to understand, how do I take on these multinational companies and governments that allowed this to happen? Well, it happened, and then what they're going to say is, well, as they did during COVID, it is not mandatory, but if you don't take it, you can't engage in society. No matter what they said, it doesn't matter what the courts say, it doesn't matter whether they said it was coercive or not, it'll be the private organisations that'll push it out. Therefore, it reduces one lawyer's scope from a legal perspective to understand how they may litigate against these multinational corporations in circumstances where really it started off by virtue of the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. So you've got to take it all the way back, and it's gone back quite a significant amount of years, and it is very concerning.
It's very interesting. Just looking, imagine we're on this grid or on this boat. Can we abandon our smartphones, social media, digital IDs, digital money? Robin, we really can't abandon any of those. And if we can't really abandon those, we often say we can, but could you imagine not having your mobile phone or your social media, digital IDs? We can. Digital money, you can, but if they end up making it impossible, like in Australia, somebody mentioned to me today that what happens in the bush when all the banks disappear and you only have basically digital money. So you really can't get away from it, can you, Robin?
No, it's becoming more and more of a problem. I'll just give you another, for instance, from this country. So when the government was encountering resistance on forcing through digital ID, and they have actually tried several times over the course of the last couple of decades to enforce this, but they were encountering resistance, and so they basically sneaked in through regulations that all directors of companies have to be digitally ID'd. And we're now at a point where companies are going to be struck off from companies' house registration if their directors aren't all digitally ID'd. So the government isn't just doing a sort of frontal attack; it's also trying to work around the edges in much the same way as Tony was talking about. And I think we will find, as we did with all the COVID regulations, that all sorts of nudge approaches are used in order to make people have to do what they want. Having said that, people are more awake than they were, so there is some hope that people may be able to do something about it. I'm just not sure what exactly we could do at the moment, and indeed we're not really organised to do it. So I think that's going to be a severe restriction on any chances of a fight back.
What can we do about it? I mean, smartphones, some say have a dirty phone, that second phone, but then they'll probably make those illegal. Social media, or the anti-social media. I mean, if they shut down X and all those, new ones would just pop up and just be as bad. Digital IDs, don't have that, you won't be able to exist. You won't be able to go shopping. You won't have anything because it's all tied to your biometric passport or whatever they call it. Digital money, I mentioned the Australian thing. If there's no banks there, you can only do business with digital money. How do we get off that bandwagon? How can we not exist with it? Or is that just wishful thinking?
Well, I do believe that citizens can mobilize and they can present and introduce referendums that actually do get the consent of the people behind whatever the referendum's about. And I believe that, obviously, if people are aware of this move to control every aspect of our life, where if you say the wrong thing and you're constantly being monitored, you don't have access to your own money and will starve to death ultimately. And of course, they have the plan to outlaw cash, so you can't get around it. And so, yeah, these are the moves that are being made all around the world by all the governments. And it's up to the people to mobilize and actually make their presence known. I mean, in America, they have made the presence at least known with the central bank digital currencies supposedly have been introduced and then, scuttled. And so, yes, I think that the people's voice can be heard and then get through halls of Congress, etc., to make a difference. Because obviously the other alternative of allowing this all to just unfold without resistance is a horrible, nightmarish scenario that we're all aware of. And I think most of the people have some level of awareness that there's this move towards absolute control over the population. So it's a matter of, again, trying to educate people and empower people to resist. I'm a believer in civil disobedience, and I do believe that the people can unite and make their voice known and change government. I have to believe this as a fighter.
Tony Nikolic, the threat of AI enabling government control. You can't stop it. They're going to do what they want to do. As well as the problems that AI will cause unemployment. Let me read this. Nobel laureate Geoffrey Hinton, is the godfather of AI, warns the future is likely an economic dystopia. Big companies are betting on massive job replacement by AI because that's where the big money is. Now, asked whether AI investments could pay off without eviscerating the job market, Hilton said, "I believe that it can't. To make money, you're going to have to replace human labour." That itself would signify that things are going to change dramatically. And just thinking, imagine if we have huge unemployment, just say in Australia and the UK, but it'll happen around the world. If they are unemployed, that will put enormous stress on government to make sure that they don't all starve to death, make sure they've got somewhere to live, make sure they have some sort of decency. Do you think AI, instead of being that terrible demon that was going to destroy mankind, is still going to destroy mankind, but it's going to do it in a different way?
Well, look, very relevant questions. Look, there are positives and negatives for everything. AI, on one side, has increased efficiency in many industries, some of which we see on a daily basis now, whether it be in an administrative side, whether it be in law, medicine, and other areas. But let's just unpack that slightly. I think what you just said there does provide a chilling example of what can occur. And in that sense, let's think about it like this. I remember going to the grocery store when some years back when they started, those automatic checkouts. And you see that in many stores all around the world. I remember being in Texas last year, in California, and you go through, you collect your items, you go through the checkout and you're scanning them yourself. And on my way out the door, I said, "When's the Christmas party on?" And they said, "Oh, that's only that's only for employees." And I said, "But I've just done your job." So, so at the end of the day, it's you're right. It is a replacement, and what's most unfortunate is that it's that creep that we're starting to see come through. But the chilling effect, I think, if I can point you towards a 1993 movie, Demolition Man, Wesley Snipes, Sandra Bullock, and Sylvester Stallone, where he was a police officer, Sylvester, in cryogenics, and they're walking down the street, and I think it was Wesley Snipes lets out a curse word, and it's like a parking meter spits out a fine, and it knew it was him by virtue of the facial recognition, the surveillance, the chips. Now, that was 1993, and what they were indicating at that time is, where is this going? It was about a highly controlled society where censorship, technocratic governance, and all this was coming into the picture. So it is alarming, and it does go back to what I was saying at the start, this issue of Jeremy Bentham's panopticon, a very intelligent Englishman back then to have perceived what was due in the future, and same with Benjamin Franklin. But what we see here is this technocratic governance themes that they are absolutely similar to this panopticon idea, where what we do now is going to be controlled by AI. And AI, I can tell you right now, we know for a fact, and it doesn't matter whether you look in Australia or whether you look anywhere around the world, you're starting to see heavily resourced data centres popping up, and transmission lines, big time battery powers. These packages are being set up all over the world. It's not a case of, are humans going to be dispensable? They already are. It's already showing it. It's the precursor of what we got to come. And whether there is this idea of people not being required, we're starting to see humanity say, let's embrace AI, not understanding that there are these large corporations out there actually working towards eliminating the utility of humans. I'm not saying that there's going to be this mass genocide, I'm not saying that, but I'm talking about it from an employment and a utility perspective. There will always be hands-on ideas, but even in that sense, we're starting to see the development of robots that can do great things in terms of replicating human movement.
I was looking at some research today, and one of those was Soylent Green. Remember that film with Charlton Heston? And they had a solution for too many people, those that weren't required. They ate them. They made them into green tablets. Anyway, it's just another one of my little hobbies, finding terrible things that could happen to us. But do you think, we're living in in the dystopia already? Many of us, I think, are kidding ourselves that we can stop this if enough people don't comply. That's what I think. I think and you just look at the bush in Australia. If they don't comply, they're not going to have anything. They're going to have to stop doing what they're doing. They'll starve to death. Well, they won't just throw a sheep on the barbie, but they're not going to have a very good life at all. Now, the same thing in the cities. If you don't comply, the way things will be set up, you won't have your entertainment, you won't have your transport, you won't have your water, your electricity, and so forth, because you're not part of the digital society. Robin, do you think we are kidding ourselves?
Well, I think it's difficult to say, but what I would say is that here we've got a situation where the state is very ineffective at dealing with people that are fully non-compliant. The people who wind up being most prejudiced by all the various rules and regulations that are being pumped out are the compliant people and the law-abiding. And our system is also being run in such a way that there's really quite vast corruption. I don't think I can give a more appalling example than the fact that we've had Pakistani Muslim child rape gangs operating in at least 50 towns and cities across the United Kingdom for at least 30 years. The estimate of the numbers of girls who've been raped and pimped are something in the order of 250,000. And officialdom, the government, the political parties, the media have all basically colluded with this. They have in effect supported the gangs and not done anything about them until recently. And even now, we've got a government who's basically trying to do the minimum possible about it. So the direction we're headed in is not only all these control mechanisms that we've been talking about, but it's also a frightening prospect of just how appallingly corrupt our system is.
Joaquin?
Well, I would go so far as to say the people might mobilize to get off their ass and become activists if they realize that humans, by the system, this evil system that we're addressing today, wants us dead. I mean, the bottom line is we are useless eaters, according to Henry Kissinger, and we are expendable, according to this AI robotics movement takeover. And they aim to replace us by the evil governments that are largely, I believe, controlled by Satanists. So, I mean, if it's put to the people that, do you want to die? Do you want to just roll over and die for simply being ignorant or too afraid? Or are we going to actually stand up for what is morally correct and self-preservation so that we unite and fight an ugly, overbearing system that's out of control? And I believe if people become enlightened to the point that we can be empowered to resist and actively oppose and potentially defeat this evil system, that it will be done. It may not. It may be too late, as you alluded to earlier. But I would rather go down fighting than just roll over and die.
I think before you fight, you need a good lawyer. Tony Nikolic, you're a good lawyer and you can defend him. I just want to, just on the AI thing, somebody wrote in and they said that they asked if I was AI. I thought, get stuffed. But I did refer them to my father, which was Jaime out of Get Smart. So Tony, tell me what your thoughts on, do you think it's too late? Do you think we're just sort of kidding ourselves?
Well, look, I think the horse has bolted, but I think if there's anything to do, I think Joaquin's sort of touching on something, which is the pushback. And the pushback would more so, in my view, not regress to the extent of the abolition of AI, rather tighter controls that are in the public interest. And the reason I say that is because it's just gone too far down the track. And the only other way we can do something, and the reason here it is, here's a really good one. So if you look at the Australian Legislation Amendment Identifying and Disruption Act 2021, well, it looked at ideas of facial recognition, CCTV systems, again, go back to that panopticon system, but one of the most chilling effects it has is that it has gone so far that it's actually affected human behaviour. An example of that would be how many of us, and we go to a restaurant and you see a family eating at a restaurant, unlike how we grew up, where the family would be sitting there talking and maybe a kid throwing a pea at someone else and someone throwing a carrot across the table. That was happening. You don't get that now. They're sending each other text messages and mum and dad are on the phone, the kids are on the phone. So we've actually started to dehumanise and started to digitalise human interaction to the extent where even that intimate family relationship is being affected. That is a significant concern, because that now starts taking that emotional connection, which is something that humans intrinsically over thousands of years have been able to communicate in terms of how they operate. So that is certainly one of the issues, well, amongst the many that we have. But when we actually break this down, you look at that movie, The Matrix, with Keanu Reeves, and it was a metaphor. And it was a brilliant movie in 2000s, the early 2000s. And again, I'm speaking to movies because there was foresight into what was happening. Now, in that, you had these digital sentinels that when you plugged into the system, they would track you down. And those digital sentinels were hard to abolish. But one of the most significant features of what I've just spoken about there is the philosophical underpinning that when Keanu Reeves was walking down the street, he was literally looking around saying, how many people are really unplugged from the system as they are perceiving themselves in this world that just interacts. I'm going to work, I don't talk to anybody. This is exactly what they were looking at back then. And it's not until you plug into the system that you become a target. And that is where the sentinels would then come out and take you. So look, yes, it is a metaphor, but it was a metaphor of incredible foresight that underpinned that whole idea of plugging into a system, which is what we are doing at the present moment. And unplugging from that system is where we're going to start to see ourselves, which is where Joaquin is sort of tending to push, which is in this idea where when you unplug from that system and you start to push back, it could lead to some form of a fight back, but then how far are the governments going to push to entrench that idea that you must be plugged in or you get nothing? And as in the Terminator films, there was a battle, and that is where Joaquin is going, and there may be a battle between technology and humanity, and that is the next battlefield that I see.
Skyweb. I'm just thinking before you go, Tony, we see for example, the Australian government pushing ahead with these monstrosities, some call them data centres, magnificent for neighbourhoods, because you've got this ginormous building there that uses a ginormous amount of water, which can't be used after because it's poisonous, and gobbles up an enormous amount of electricity, which Chris Bowen is going to have trouble with very shortly, because you need electricity, and if you've got windmills, they're not going to do the job, or even the solar panels not going to do the job. Why would can I just ask you, is this part of the control, and it's all over the world, not just Australia, that they're building these great big monstrosities to handle the data, to handle extra tasks, to make AI even better or more controlling, giving government more control, giving the oligarchs more control, making it a stack of money for those investing in it, and yet the taxpayer is paying a great chunk of it. Do you think the data centres, which there is no transparency, coming to a neighbourhood near you, don't tell anyone, these data centres, do you think the government is keeping this all hush-hush, or not hush-hush, but don't talk about it, the transparency is non-existent. There has to be a reason besides making your computer work better or having faster access to grok. There has to be another reason. One, it's money, I suppose, because they are investing. They're not employing anyone because you don't need anyone. So what's your views on this? Why do you think government is actually, just because I've gone through a bunch of points, why do you think government succinctly is pushing ahead with these data centers that is going to be the engine that drives all the dystopia we're talking about?
Well, essentially, the taxpayer is actually paying for the handcuffs that are going to suppress them, aren't they? They're actually paying for the ball and chain that's holding them back. However, they just don't know it yet. And at some point, you're going to have this centralisation of economic power, and everything we've spoken about here really talks about the centralisation and digitisation of power, and the materialisation of that globally is the impact upon which we are yet to see the full impact. But as you know, the economics of it is, as the taxpayer, you give, they take, and it's what they call the give and take system, right? But at the end of the day, they're creating and they're constructing these enormous monstrosities that tap into the power grid of every nation. So there's a number of issues here. One is the materialisation and transmission of communications. That's a positive. We can get things across the nation. But the negatives are that is going to be intercepted. Someone who's working on a trademark or a patent won't be private for long, because it's going to go drifting across this internet highway, if we can call it. And these data centres are going to expand on the use of minerals and resources that are going to detract even further, and the consumption of land. Now, when you put all this together, there is very little room for hard labour in the sense of what we've been seeing, and so you're going to start seeing the automation of a lot of things, and the enforcement capacity in the sense of the administrative powers. And as a lawyer, and I'm sure Robin would know this too, up until now you could talk to a human and you could negotiate about, say, a charge or a context. What is the context? And you could tap into the human emotion of the prosecutor or the other lawyer or the government agency, and you can say, well, what is the context behind this? Well, that's not going to happen, because AI is going to be given a yes or a no. There is no middle ground. There is no context. And that is the danger here, is where these administrative, legal, and potentially constitutional questions are going to be reified and concrete in the old binary system of yes or no. And it's that simple. There is no context. You either did it or you don't. And that is the alarming feature, because we've taken that emotional context of human communication out of it.
Robin, as a lawyer, would you like also to have your two bobs worth?
Yes, well, Tony's got a very good point there. In fact, here we've got the Master of the Rolls, one of our senior judges, talking about trying to change the court system so that cases are going to be decided by AI rather than by a judge. We are. And by the way, people have been talking about surveillance. I'm told that London is the most heavily surveilled city in the entire world. So I think we're unfortunately rather far down the road. And one of the things that I think we learnt with the reaction to all the COVID emergency regulations was that people are very, very easily persuaded to be utterly compliant.
The topic was only the paranoid survive, taken from Person of Interest, but that's a very old series. Yet it's even more relevant today. Do you think, before I get into that final question, how do you see the future? And I'll stay with you, Robin, here. How do you see? And I could, you'd say 20 years or 30 years. things are happening so fast. Let's say, 3.5 years, 2030. How do you think the future looks?
Well, can I first of all say, with the series Personal Interest, what we got there is that the machine, the computer system at the heart of it, the AI, as it were, is actually working for the good of people. And I think our worry here is that the machine won't actually work for the good of people; it'll be working against people. And that's the alarming prospect before us. And I do remember somebody talking about a theory of why we don't come across any aliens. And the answer to that was said to be that very likely many species that get to the point that we're at then wind up getting completely taken over by the machines. And they either cease to exist and the machines wipe them out, or at any rate they control them to the point where there's no further development. And I think there's the whole way in which AI is being rolled out. It's difficult to see how that's going to be in our best interest in the long run. And I just want to give one for instance of something that people became aware of a few years ago, and there was an outcry about it, but it probably is symptomatic of the kind of uses to which AI will be put by governments, which was an American development of a next generation minefield. And what they were working on was having basically a robot embedded in the minefield area. The command was to kill all human beings that come into that area. It was not going to be plugged into the internet, or there would be no off switch, and the thing would carry on killing all human beings that came into that area for as long as it had power. The idea that the military could think that was a good idea shows just how we could wind up with some absolute monstrous system that is wholly destructive to humanity.
We've got to be careful. Watch out for those Daleks. There's another one. But you're pretty safe here, Robin. You've got your two muskets behind you, and you tell me they can work. It'll just bounce off and boing. We will destroy. Just quickly, okay, final question. Robin, I'll stay with you again, then I'll head to the others in 1 second. Harold Finch says only the paranoid survive.
Yes. So he's of course decided to cut himself off, hasn't he, from all those that loved him. So it's a sort of quite thin survival, although he does then dedicate himself to trying to do some good. I don't know whether that's a great model to follow for all of us, but at least he does actually achieve some good, which is the fictional part of it, unfortunately.
Well, Kim, forget the series. It's a great series, by the way. It's on again on I think one of the streaming channels. But Harold says only the paranoid survive. And if you look at AI and you look at government, the overreach, look at the elite and all those, he's not completely wrong, is he?
Well, I suppose not, but I believe that only the brave will survive. And so basically, we talked about the AI data centers and all of this. Well, I'm a firm believer in localization. That's where we become empowered, when we have our neighbors and our townspeople together, unified, and this whole outgrowth of thousands upon thousands of data centers all over the world being constructed and already in use for this, quote, evil purpose. it's been known that communities that get together and unite are able to overcome this movement, this overpowering movement that, many of us feel like we're not strong enough to overcome. Well, I believe that we are, but it starts grassroots level on up. And that's where I think we need to go.
Tony, only the paranoid survive. If they are paranoid, maybe a good lawyer. No, but truly, only the paranoid survive. Harold Finch, now forget the TV show. If you look at all the intrusions and all the threats that are around us, and most of those government-led or initiated in many cases, I think it's not such a bad piece of advice. What's your thoughts?
Well, look, again, it's uncovering a certain tension, isn't it? So on one side, you have this idea that government is doing good and they're attempting and they're striving for good. But the underpinning philosophical part of the positivity would be that, well, military intelligence, criminal intelligence, there is an element of paranoia there, legal intelligence. Imagine a lawyer that just thought everything that was happening was okay and nothing's going to happen to your client. Well, no, you've got to take a pessimistic view and there's got to be an element of paranoia there. Otherwise, your client's going to be sold down the river. And if you look at corporations, they're always looking at what is my competitor doing. A classic example of that would be Kodak. Kodak went from, if you remember the old films that I guess every one of us would know about that, but they failed to jump on that train of digital photography. The Beta and the VHS, well, Beta was the dominant technology of the time, but VHS had the better marketing campaign, so they tapped into that level of market paranoia. So it's not all negative, but, and here's the big one, is that when it's used to intrude, and by way of intrusion, we start seeing the collection of metadata, facial recognition, biometrics, controlling how you spend, controlling where you go. You look at the cars, the electric cars. Well, that's just an immobiliser and you're done. Well, I drive a big V8, Mike, and I don't know an immobiliser that's going to stop that going 110 down the freeway. So, there's still that element of what Joaquin's talking about, which is if it is this idea of electrics and data, and there are ways to understand that you do still have a choice, and there is this further idea where if people do get together, they can make a change, but it's not going to happen if everyone's walking down the street as they do in the Matrix, and there is a minority who's looking around left and right saying, oh my God, everyone else is in a daze.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because I've seen your car, it's that got the big fats on it, bright pink, got that. I'm not sure about the colour of the dice that's hanging from the rear vision mirror.
Yeah, it's a disco ball in the back seat that confuses everyone.
Happy days are here. Look, it's I don't know what to think of what's going to happen in the future. I think we're in deep shit, as they would say, and I think government is. They've learned a lot from the COVID days, and they're going to do a lot more. They've learned how to regroup, how to the misinformation that they were contending with, which they were the ones providing it, by the way. They can now control that. They just, like for example, I went to Grok to put in a couple of images, and they kept telling me, this is for the Victorian government. If you can't do that, that's not nice, and things. It will create angst with the person that you. And it's like we're talking about, nothing really serious. But Grok was telling me that the Victorian government was out of bounds, and I could not get an image that says what, for example, Jacinta Allen is doing to the state. So I think government are pretty well, they're controlling many things, and I think 2030 is a date not to be looking forward to, and I think it's rolling around very quickly. And I think if you look at all the countries with censorship, von der Leyen, I see that a whole bunch of her cronies got together and they're going to they're saying all these things, censorship, control of internet, digital IDs and stuff, it's good for the children. And that's their way of getting through the resistance of those saying, get out of our effing lives.
Well,
Robin,
Mike, can I just add one sorry,
you
mate, I
can.
don't mean to interject.
Please go ahead.
The issue with respect to what you're saying there is twofold. One is the constitutional implications of the social media world, of what you've just said there, where Grok is now impeding and impinging upon free speech and free political communication. Here in Australia, we have the implied ideas, but political speech is one of the most hallowed, if not most consistently enforced here in Australia under the Constitution. So where you get Grok and other platforms doing that, well, that is seriously, in my view, an impermissible burden on that very idea, and we need to push back on those ideas. Now, given that safety with respect to saying a comment about a political party, look, as long as it's not violent, and like, I'm not going to say it, but I think we know there's a limit there. But putting a Pinocchio nose on a political leader,
do it.
That's been satire since World War I in the trenches, and that's what they fought for. So how on earth have we come to a point to where we have social media now acting as the arbiters of truth? Well, that is your misinformation and disinformation right there.
Yeah, there is no vessel in social media for real freedom of speech. It is exactly what they want you to say. If you disagree with them or have a contrary opinion, then it's like us, we're on X, we are a tier 1, which is the worst you can get. And we often had people, because we'll move off the socials fairly soon, but we often have people writing into us saying, we've noticed your views are disappearing in front of us. And I find there are just becoming non-people, non-viewers. So I think they control everything they want to control. But Kim's just disappeared. He's coming back in a second, just like that. There he is, just come back again. So anyway, I think we're in deep garbage. I think we're in trouble. But we haven't got time to talk about that because it's Friday night here. I have a scotch waiting for me and the football's on. Robin Tilbrook, we must educate you one day on Australian rules football. It's probably the best sport in Australia. And so we should make
misinformation, Rob, misinformation, mate.
No, look at me. Would I lie to you, Robin? No, St Kilda is by far the best football club in the entire world. But Robin Tilbrook, if somebody wants to find out, including the St Kilda Football Club, about you, how do they do that?
Well, I am on Twitter or X as at Robin Tilbrook.
That's good. We'll send you the membership details later. And Kim, I know you were hanging out for that information about the St Kilda Football Club, so we'll send that to you too via Water Buffalo. But if somebody wants to contact you, how do they do that?
Thegovernmentrag.com is where all my articles go.
Fantastic. So succinct there. And Tony Nikolic, what about you?
Instagram at AFL Solicitors and on X at Tony Nikolic 10. It's all happening. So thank you very much. And you can contact aflsolicitors.com.au if you want more articles and issues that we publish.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, Robin, Kim, and Tony. This has been The Protagonist. Person of Interest was one of my favourite TV shows. I won't tell you how it finishes, but it could have been another series. But anyway, never will. And by the way, as Tony Nikolic said, that was misinformation about the St Kilda Football Club. It was not. It was the pure truth. Catch you next week. Have a great weekend. May your team win. Be kind to your neighbours. Be kind to yourself.
Only the paranoid survive.